My son-in-law looked at me across that courtroom and smirked. He's so broke he can't even afford a lawyer. Pathetic. I sat there at 68 years old, silent, no response, no defense, nothing. 5 minutes later, the doors opened. A man in an expensive suit walked in silver hair, commanding presence the kind of lawyer billionaires hire. The entire courtroom went silent, and my son-in-law's face went white. Hey there, thanks for joining us today. Before we dive into this incredible story, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling us where you're tuning in from. Quick note, some details in this story have been dramatized for storytelling purposes, and any resemblance to actual people or places is purely coincidental, but the message that's 100% real. Let's get started. I sat alone at the defense table, hands folded so tightly my knuckles had turned white. 68 years old, and this is what my life had come to. The courtroom smelled like floor wax and old paper, the scent of endings. My gray suit, the one I'd worn to my wife's funeral 5 years ago, hung loose on my shoulders now. Across the aisle, my son-in-law sat like a king. Trevor Manning, 38, $4,000 Armani suit, dark hair slicked back, Rolex glinting on his wrist. That smile, sharp, white, cruel. "Look at him," Trevor said loud enough for me to hear. "Where's your lawyer, old man? You can't afford one. Can you—" I didn't look up. I stared at the empty chair beside me. The man next to Trevor was Mitchell Crane, his attorney, 52. They called him the Shark of Michigan Avenue, navy suit, leather briefcase. He whispered something to Trevor. They both laughed. And sitting right there next to Trevor was my daughter, Rebecca, 34, simple black dress. She sat perfectly still and wouldn't look at me. Her eyes stayed fixed on the judge's empty bench. I remembered her at 7, pigtails bouncing, running alongside a pink bicycle. "I've got you, sweetheart," I'd said. "I'll always catch you." The memory dissolved. Now she was 34, silent, sitting next to the man destroying me. All rise, the Honorable Judge Patricia Coleman presiding. I stood slowly. Judge Coleman swept in, black robe billowing, 58, steel gray hair in a tight bun, 25 years on the bench. She rapped her gavel once. "Be seated. At case number 24-CV-0091, Bradford versus Bradford Manning." She looked at me. "Mr. Bradford, I see you are alone. Are you expecting counsel?" I stood. My voice came out hoarse. "Yes, Your Honor, she should be here." "He's stalling, Your Honor," Trevor interrupted. "He doesn't have anyone. He's broke." My face flushed. Judge Coleman's eyes snapped to Trevor. "Mr. Manning, you will address the court only when spoken to." Trevor raised his hands. "My apologies. My father-in-law has wasted enough time." Father-in-law? The way he said it made my skin crawl. Judge Coleman looked at me again. "Mr. Bradford, court time is valuable. If you don't have representation—" "I do," I said quickly. "She's coming. She called last night." Trevor snorted. "Who your imaginary friend?" Last night at 11, my phone rang. The voice on the other end, rough familiar, said, "Tom Bradford, it's Charles. Charles Manning, I got your message. I'm coming. Hold on." I'd cried into the phone. "I don't know if you'll make it in time." "I'll make it. Just hold on." 30 years since we'd spoken. But that call was the only hope I had left. Judge Coleman sighed. She picked up her gavel. "Mr. Bradford, I sympathize, but we cannot delay indefinitely. I'm going to have to—" "Please, Your Honor," I said. My voice broke. "Just 2 more minutes." Trevor leaned back, grinning. "This is pathetic." Mitchell began packing his briefcase. Rebecca stared at her hands. Judge Coleman raised the gavel. "Mr. Bradford, I'm sorry. We will proceed with—" Then the doors exploded open. The sound hit me first. Not the doors those I'd already heard. It was the footsteps. Click, click, click. Slow, steady, deliberate. Like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. I turned. A man stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light. Tall, broad-shouldered, white suit that caught the light like armor. And behind him, 3 more figures. Younger, sharp, moving in formation like a V of geese. Click, click, click. The courtroom fell silent. Mitchell Crane's pen clattered to the table. His face went white. Trevor frowned, squinting. "Who is that?" The man walked forward, not fast, not slow, just inevitable. Silver hair, swept back, blue eyes that could cut glass, And a presence, God, the presence that filled the room like a thunderclap. I felt my chest tighten. He'd actually come. The man reached our table. He set down a leather briefcase, soft, expensive leather, the kind that whispered money, and then placed a business card on the stenographer's desk. Embossed, cream-colored, simple. Then he turned to face Judge Coleman. "Your Honor," he said. His voice was smooth, controlled, but it carried weight. "Charles Manning, Senior Managing Partner at Bennett and Manning Associates of Washington, D.C. I am entering my appearance as counsel for the defendant, Mr. Thomas Bradford." The room exploded. Voices overlapped. Someone gasped. A reporter scrambled for her phone. Judge Coleman's gavel came down. "Order," but I barely heard it. Charles Manning. Charles. I hadn't seen him in 30 years, not since we'd lost touch after the war. And now he was here, standing beside me, in a courtroom, defending me. Mitchell Crane stood, his face still pale. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Counsel can't just appear in the middle of Mr. Crane." Judge Coleman said sharply, "Mr. Manning has filed his appearance. Unless you have a valid objection, sit down." Mitchell sat. Trevor was leaning forward now, staring at Charles. His brow furrowed, his mouth opened slightly. "Wait," Trevor whispered. "Is that—" But Charles didn't look at him. He turned, slowly, and for the first time since he'd walked into that courtroom, he looked directly at Trevor Manning, his son. And Trevor, arrogant, smug. Trevor went completely still. Charles didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just looked at him, long enough for Trevor to understand. "I know what you did." Then Charles turned back to the bench. "Your Honor, if I may, I'd like to begin by addressing the fraudulent power of attorney that has been presented as evidence." Judge Coleman nodded. "You may proceed, Mr. Manning." One of the younger men, late 20s, sharp suit, nervous energy, stepped forward and handed Charles a thick folder. Charles opened it, pulled out a document. "This," he said, holding it up, "is the so-called POA bearing Mr. Bradford's signature. It has been analyzed by 3 independent forensic handwriting experts. All 3 have concluded that the signature is forged." He set the document on the table in front of Judge Coleman. "Your Honor, my client has been systematically defrauded. His accounts have been frozen, his assets have been stolen, and his daughter has been manipulated and isolated by the man sitting across from me." Trevor shot to his feet. "That's not Mr. Manning." "Sit down," Judge Coleman snapped. Trevor sat. Charles didn't even glance at him. "Your Honor." Charles continued, "I intend to prove not only that Trevor Manning committed fraud and elder financial abuse, but that he did so with premeditation, coercion, and malice." He paused. "And I will do so using his own words." The room was dead silent. I looked at Trevor. His face had gone from red to white to gray. And then I looked at Charles, my old friend, my defender. The man who'd flown in from Washington to save me. He glanced back at Trevor one more time, and this time he smiled. It was not a kind smile. The word fell from Trevor's lips like a stone. "Dad!" His face had drained of color, all that arrogance, all that smugness gone. He looked like a man who'd just seen a ghost step out of his worst nightmare. The courtroom erupted. Voices overlapped. Someone gasped. A reporter in the back row scrambled for her phone. Mitchell Crane's pen clattered to the table again, and this time he didn't bother picking it up. Judge Coleman's gavel came down hard. "Order, order in this court." She struck it twice more. The noise died, but the tension didn't. Every eye in that room was locked on Charles Manning. And Charles. He didn't flinch. He turned to face the bench, calm as a winter morning. His voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Yes, Your Honor. Trevor Manning is my son. That is precisely why I know exactly what he is capable of doing." I felt my chest tighten. My son-in-law. His son. Trevor shot to his feet. "You can't. This is a conflict of—" "Sit down, Mr. Manning," Judge Coleman said sharply. "Your attorney can raise objections. You cannot." Mitchell started to rise, but Charles raised one hand. It wasn't a large gesture, but it stopped Mitchell cold. "If opposing counsel wishes to challenge my standing," Charles said smoothly, "I invite him to do so. I have disclosed my relationship. I have no financial interest in this case, and I am here to protect my client, Mr. Thomas Bradford, from elder financial abuse perpetrated by my son." The room went silent again. Elder financial abuse. The words hung in the air like an indictment. Charles turned back toward our table. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. It landed on the defense table with a heavy thud. "Let's start with the basics," Charles said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. 3 months ago, Trevor Manning used a forged power of attorney document to freeze Mr. Bradford's bank accounts. All of them. $14.5 million locked away. Mr. Bradford couldn't access his own money, couldn't pay his bills, couldn't hire an attorney. He pulled out a document, held it up. This is the so-called POA. It bears Mr. Bradford's signature, except it's not his signature. It's a forgery. A very good one, I'll admit, but a forgery nonetheless. We've had it analyzed by 3 independent handwriting experts. All 3 confirm this document is fraudulent. Trevor's jaw worked. He looked at Mitchell, but Mitchell wouldn't meet his eyes. "Your Honor," Charles said, turning back to the bench. "Mr. Manning obtained this fraudulent document under coercion. He threatened Mr. Bradford, told him if he didn't sign, he'd never see his daughter again." I felt my throat tighten. It was true, every word. Rebecca's head snapped toward Trevor. I saw it just for a second, doubt flicker across her face. Charles wasn't finished. "And where did that $14.5 million go?" He pulled out another document. $8 million was transferred to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, an account controlled by Trevor Manning. The remaining funds were frozen ostensibly for estate management. He let that sink in. Why would Trevor Manning need $8 million so desperately? Charles turned and looked directly at his son. Because he owes money, a significant amount, to a man named Tony Romano, gambling debts, and Trevor needed to pay them, fast. Trevor's face went from white to red. "That's a lie." "Is it?" Charles's voice was ice. "We'll see." Judge Coleman leaned forward. "Mr. Manning, do you have evidence to support these claims?" "I do, Your Honor. Bank records, forensic accounting reports, witness testimony. And I'd like to call my first witness." He paused. "Trevor Manning." The courtroom exploded again. Trevor Manning walked to the witness stand like a man approaching the gallows. I watched him take each step, slow, deliberate. His shoulders were tense, his jaw locked. He looked at Rebecca once as if searching for reassurance. She didn't look back. The bailiff swore him in. Trevor sat. His hand trembled as he adjusted the microphone. Charles stood at the defense table, buttoning his suit jacket. Then he walked forward, not rushed, not slow, just steady. "Mr. Manning," Charles began, his voice calm, almost gentle. "When did you first meet Thomas Bradford?" Trevor cleared his throat. 4 years ago, at a gallery opening, Rebecca introduced us." "And when did you begin planning to steal his money?" The question hit like a hammer. "Objection," Trevor snapped. Then he looked around, realizing he had no lawyer left to object for him. Judge Coleman leaned forward. "Mr. Manning, you are not permitted to object on your own behalf. Answer the question." Trevor's face flushed. "I didn't steal anything. Thomas is elderly. He wasn't managing his finances properly. I was helping," Charles repeated. The word dripped with contempt. "Is that why you deleted his text messages from Rebecca's phone?" Trevor froze. Charles walked to his briefcase and pulled out a thin tablet. He tapped the screen, then held it up. "These messages were recovered from the cloud. Let me read one, sent 2 years ago." He paused. "Sweetheart, why won't you answer my calls? I miss you. Please call me back. Love, Dad." My chest tightened. I remembered typing that message, late at night, sitting alone in the kitchen, hoping, praying. Rebecca made a sound, a small broken sound. I turned. Tears were streaming down her face. "Rebecca never received that message," Charles said quietly, "or the dozen others like it, because you, Trevor Manning, installed spyware on her phone. You intercepted every message, every call. You isolated her from her father." "That's not," Trevor started. "Why?" Charles's voice rose. "So she wouldn't know what you were doing. So she wouldn't ask questions when you forged her father's signature. So she'd believe your lies about him being senile and controlling." Trevor shot to his feet. "She chose me because he jabbed a finger at me, is a controlling, bitter old man who never let her breathe. Mr. Manning." Judge Coleman's gavel came down hard. "Control yourself." But Trevor wasn't listening. His face was red, his fists clenched. "I gave her a life. I gave her freedom. And what did he give her? Guilt trips and manipulation." "Sit down," Charles said coldly. Trevor sat. His chest was heaving. Charles turned slightly. "Let's talk about Tony Romano." Trevor went pale again. "Why do you owe Mr. Romano $2.3 million? Silence. "And why does he need payment by this Friday?" More silence. Sweat beaded on Trevor's forehead. "Answer the question, Mr. Manning," Judge Coleman said. Trevor's mouth opened, closed. Nothing came out. Charles turned to the bench. "Your Honor, I believe we've established sufficient evidence of fraud, coercion, and elder financial abuse. I would also note, Your Honor." Mitchell Crane stood. His face was gray. "I must withdraw as counsel for Mr. Manning. A conflict of professional ethics has arisen." Judge Coleman studied him. "Granted. You may leave, Mr. Crane." Mitchell gathered his briefcase. He didn't look at Trevor. He didn't say goodbye. He just walked out. And Trevor was alone. I watched him look at the empty chair where his attorney had been, then at his father, whose eyes held nothing but cold disgust, then at Rebecca, whose face was streaked with tears and doubt. He was completely, utterly alone. And then the door opened again. The courtroom was still buzzing when Charles stood again. Trevor was still on the witness stand, still shaking, still trapped. "Your Honor," Charles said calmly, "I have one more witness, someone who can speak directly to Mr. Manning's financial motivations." Judge Coleman nodded. "Call your witness." Charles turned toward the back of the room. "I call Mr. Tony Romano." The doors opened, and the man who walked through them was not a lawyer. He was a nightmare, 6'4", maybe 50 years old. Black suit that looked like it cost more than my car. A gold ring on his right hand the size of a walnut. And behind him, two men, thick necks, dead eyes, hands folded like sentries. Trevor's face went white. "No," he whispered, "not him." Tony Romano walked down the aisle slowly, deliberately. Every step echoed in the silent courtroom. He reached the witness stand. Officer Davis swore him in. Tony sat. He didn't look nervous, didn't look uncomfortable. He looked like a man who owned the room. Charles approached. "Mr. Romano, could you please state your relationship with Trevor Manning?" Tony's voice was smooth, almost polite, but it had weight. "Trevor Manning owes my organization $2.3 million. Gambling debts, signed contract, 15% interest per month compounded." The courtroom went silent. Charles pulled out a document. "Is this the loan agreement?" Tony glanced at it. "Yes." "And when did Mr. Manning promise to pay you back?" "This Friday." Charles nodded. "Did Mr. Manning tell you how he intended to get the money?" Tony leaned back slightly. "He did. Thursday night he called me, said his father-in-law was signing over everything. $14 million, he said, and I quote, 'The old man's signing the papers tomorrow. I'll have your money by Friday, I swear.'" Trevor made a sound, a small, strangled sound. "Did you believe him?" Charles asked. Tony smiled. It wasn't warm. "At the time, yes. Now," he glanced at Trevor. "Looks like he lied to both of us?" Judge Coleman leaned forward. "Mr. Romano, are you here to file a claim as a creditor?" "Yes, Your Honor. If this court seizes any assets from Mr. Manning, I want to ensure I'm first in line to collect what I'm owed." She nodded slowly. "Your claim is noted. Anything else, Mr. Manning?" Charles shook his head. "No further questions, Your Honor." Tony stood. He walked past Trevor, stopped, looked down at him. "See you around, Trev," he said softly. Then he and his two shadows walked out. The door closed. The silence that followed was crushing. I looked at Trevor. He was still sitting there on the witness stand, staring at the door. His hands gripped the armrests so hard his knuckles had gone white. Judge Coleman cleared her throat. "Mr. Charles Manning, do you have any other witnesses?" Charles nodded. "I do, Your Honor. I'd like to call Susan Morgan to the stand." Trevor's head snapped up. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I saw real fear in his eyes. Susan Morgan walked into the courtroom carrying a secret that would destroy Trevor Manning forever. She was 32, pretty in a sharp way, black blazer, dark jeans, and in her right hand, a cell phone. I watched Trevor's face turn white. "No," he whispered, "not her." Rebecca looked at him. "Who is that?" Trevor didn't answer. Charles stood. "Ms. Morgan, could you please state your relationship with Trevor Manning?" Susan stopped at the witness stand. She didn't sit yet. She just looked at Trevor. Her expression was cold. I was his girlfriend, she said clearly. For 3 years, until 6 months ago. The room erupted. Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes went wide, then wet. Trevor shot up. She's lying. She's just jealous Sit down, Mr. Manning! Judge Coleman's voice cracked like thunder. Trevor sat, but his eyes were locked on Susan. Charles walked forward slowly. Ms. Morgan, could you elaborate? Susan turned to face the courtroom. Trevor told me he only married Rebecca for her money. He said once her father died, he'd divorce her, that we'd run away together. She paused. But then I found out he'd said the same thing to at least 2 other women. Rebecca made a sound, a small, broken sound. I wanted to go to her, but I couldn't move. Charles nodded. Do you have any evidence of Mr. Manning's intentions? Susan held up her phone. I have a recording from 6 months ago. The courtroom went silent. Charles looked at Judge Coleman. Your Honor, I'd like to play this for the court. Judge Coleman nodded slowly. Proceed. Susan tapped her screen, then she held the phone up, and Trevor's voice filled the room. Susan, babe, listen. I just need to keep Rebecca thinking her dad is the villain. Once he signs over the house, I'll get rid of him. Maybe a nursing home far away. Maybe something else. Either way, he won't be a problem anymore. The silence that followed was absolute. I couldn't breathe. Get rid of him. Maybe something else. He'd planned it. He'd planned to take everything from me. And then, what locked me away? Worse, I looked at him, my son-in-law, the man who'd shaken my hand, who'd smiled at my daughter, who'd sat at my table. He'd wanted me gone. Rebecca stood. Her whole body was shaking. You! Her voice cracked. You were going to hurt my father. Trevor turned to her, hands raised. No, baby, I didn't mean it like that. I was just talking. I would never. You said you'd get rid of him, Rebecca screamed. Tears streamed down her face. Her hands were fists. You made me think he was the problem. You deleted his messages. You told me he was controlling and manipulative and... She choked on a sob. And the whole time it was you. Trevor tried to stand. Rebecca, please just listen. Mr. Manning, sit down, Judge Coleman said coldly. Trevor didn't sit. Rebecca, wait. Rebecca looked at him, really looked at him. And I saw it the moment the illusion shattered, the moment she saw who he really was. She turned, and she ran, right out of the courtroom, sobbing. Trevor lunged forward. Rebecca, wait. Sit. Down! Judge Coleman's gavel came down like a hammer. Trevor froze. Then slowly he sank back into the chair. Officer Davis moved toward the door. I heard him radio someone. We need someone to check on the plaintiff's daughter. She just left the courtroom. I sat there, numb. My daughter was gone, broken. And Trevor, my son-in-law, the man who'd stolen from me, lied to me, isolated my daughter, threatened my life, sat alone on that witness stand. His world was collapsing. And his father standing 10 feet away didn't even look at him. Charles just closed his briefcase, calm, cold, like his son was already dead to him. If you're still here after that bombshell, I need to hear from you. Drop a comment with your reaction. Are you as shocked as Rebecca? This story includes dramatized elements, but the message about family manipulation and elder abuse, that's very real. If you're invested in seeing justice served, stay with me. What happens next will show you that karma never forgets. 11:45 in the morning. Judge Coleman had called a 15-minute recess after Rebecca ran out. I'd stayed in my seat. Didn't move. Couldn't. Now the courtroom was full again. Rebecca had returned, but she wasn't sitting next to Trevor anymore. She sat in the back row, alone. Her eyes were red and swollen. Trevor was still on the witness stand, broken, hollow. And then Charles Manning stood. For the first time all day, he looked directly at his son. Your Honor, Charles said quietly, may I address the defendant directly? Judge Coleman hesitated, then nodded. You may. Charles buttoned his jacket. Then he walked forward, slowly, deliberately. He stopped right in front of Trevor, father and son, face to face. Trevor. Charles said, his voice low but clear. I raised you better than this. Your mother, God rest her soul, would be ashamed. Trevor's lip trembled. Dad, please. I made mistakes, but I'm still your son. I raised you to work hard, Charles interrupted. His voice shook slightly. To earn what you have, to build something honest. But you always chose shortcuts, always looked for the easy way. He paused. I bailed you out twice in your 20s, paid your gambling debts, gave you second chances. I thought you'd learned." His jaw tightened. "I was wrong." Trevor's face crumpled. "Dad," Charles held up a hand. "2 nights ago, Thomas Bradford called me. He was crying. He told me his son-in-law was stealing everything from him, isolating his daughter, freezing his accounts. He didn't know it was you. He just said the name, Trevor Manning." Charles's voice dropped. "I wanted to hang up. I wanted to pretend I hadn't heard it, but I couldn't." He looked at Trevor, really looked at him. "I became a lawyer to protect people like Thomas, good people, vulnerable people. If I protect you now, if I stand by you while you destroy an innocent man, I betray everything I've ever believed in." Trevor's voice cracked. "So you're choosing him over me?" Charles didn't blink. "I'm choosing justice over blood." The room was silent. Trevor's hands gripped the armrests. "I needed money, Dad. I was in too deep. I didn't know what else to do." "You could have asked me for help." Trevor froze. "You could have come to me." Charles said, his voice colder now. "You could have told me the truth. Instead, you chose to destroy a family. You chose to manipulate your wife. You chose to threaten an old man's life." He stepped back. "That's not a mistake, Trevor. That's a choice." Trevor opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Charles turned. He walked back to the defense table, and he sat down next to me. I felt my throat tighten. This man, this stranger who'd walked into my nightmare just hours ago, had sacrificed his own son. For me. For justice. I reached over and put my hand on his shoulder. "Thank you," I whispered. Charles didn't look at me. He just nodded once. His jaw was tight. His eyes were wet, but he didn't cry. I looked back at Trevor. He was still sitting there, staring at his father, at the man who'd just publicly disowned him, and I realized something. Trevor had lost everything, his wife, his reputation, his freedom. But the worst loss, the one that would haunt him forever, was sitting 10 feet away. His father's respect. Judge Coleman picked up her gavel. "We will now proceed to the verdict." 12:30 in the afternoon. Judge Patricia Coleman had presided over hundreds of cases in her 25 years on the bench. But this one would stay with her forever. She looked down at the papers in front of her. Then she looked up. Her eyes were hard. "I have seen many cases." She began, her voice steady and cold. "But elder financial abuse combined with fraud, coercion, and threats of violence, this is particularly egregious." She turned to Trevor. "Mr. Manning, you are a disgrace." Trevor didn't move. Didn't speak. Judge Coleman continued. "The court finds in favor of the defendant, Mr. Thomas Bradford, on all counts. The rulings are as follows." She lifted her gavel. 1. All assets currently held by Trevor Manning are hereby frozen effective immediately. 2. The property located at 428 Oak Park Avenue is returned to Mr. Thomas Bradford, free and clear. 3. All funds totaling $14.5 million are to be unfrozen and restored to Mr. Bradford's accounts within 48 hours. I felt my chest tighten. My home, my money, everything I thought I'd lost, it was coming back. 4. I am referring this case to the Cook County State's Attorney for Criminal Prosecution. Charges may include fraud, forgery, elder abuse, and financial exploitation. Trevor's face went gray. 5A, no contact order is hereby issued. Mr. Manning, you are not to contact, approach, or communicate with Mr. Thomas Bradford or Ms. Rebecca Bradford Manning in any form. She set down her gavel. Officer Davis, please take Mr. Manning into custody. Davis stepped forward. He pulled out a pair of handcuffs. Trevor stood slowly. His hands shook as Davis cuffed them behind his back. And then just before Davis led him away, Trevor turned. He looked at his father. "Dad." Charles didn't look back. He just stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, his eyes dry. Trevor's face crumpled, and then Davis let him out. The door closed, and I finally breathed. I heard footsteps behind me, soft, hesitant. I turned. Rebecca was walking toward me. Down the aisle, her face was streaked with tears, and then right there in the middle of the courtroom, she dropped to her knees in front of me. "Dad!" Her voice broke. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I knelt down. My knees protested, but I didn't care. I wrapped my arms around her. "It's okay, sweetheart," I whispered. "You're home now." She sobbed into my shoulder, and I held her, like I used to when she was 7, when the world was smaller, when I could still catch her. We walked out of the courthouse together. My legs were still a little shaky. Charles put a hand on my shoulder. "You okay, Tom?" I nodded. "Thanks to you, Charles, for everything." He gave a small smile. "We should stay in touch, get coffee sometime. Talk about the old days." I smiled back, for the first time in months. "I'd like that." Rebecca walked beside me, wiping her eyes. She looked lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. The autumn sunlight hit us as we stepped outside. Warm, bright, clean, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt hope. 3 months later, the story came to its final chapter. Justice doesn't always happen in a courtroom. Sometimes it happens in a cell. 3 months had passed. I sat in my living room in my house at 428 Oak Park Avenue, watching the snow fall outside the window, fat, lazy flakes drifting down like pieces of peace. The fire crackled softly in the hearth. On the mantel, a photograph of my wife smiled down at me. She'd always loved the first snowfall. The doorbell rang. I stood slower than I used to, but steady, and opened the door. Rebecca stood there holding a tin of cookies. Her face was brighter now, lighter. "Hi, Dad," I smiled. "Come in, sweetheart. It's cold out there." We sat by the fire. She poured tea. We talked about small things, her new apartment, her art classes, the way the city looked covered in snow. And then quietly, she said it. "I'm so sorry, Dad, for letting him poison me against you, for not seeing it sooner." I reached over and took her hand. "You're here now," I said. "That's all that matters." She squeezed my hand, and for a moment we just sat there, father and daughter, together again. An hour later, there was another knock. Charles Manning stood on my porch holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you could use the good stuff," he said with a grin. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I used to do Rebecca's homework with her, where my wife and I used to plan our weekends. "I'm proud of what we did," Charles said quietly. "It was the right thing." "I'm sorry you lost your son," I said. Charles shook his head. "I didn't lose him, Tom. He lost himself." We sat in silence for a moment. Then I looked out the window at the falling snow. "Family isn't just blood," I said. "It's the people who stand beside you when your world falls apart." Charles raised his coffee cup. "To family, then." We clinked cups, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Whole, Cook County Jail, cell block D. Trevor Manning sat on a narrow bunk, knees pulled to his chest. His orange jumpsuit hung loose on his frame. He'd lost weight. His beard was patchy and unkempt. His eyes were hollow. The door clanked open. Trevor looked up and froze. Tony Romano stepped inside. He was also wearing orange. Trevor's voice came out as a whisper. "No, please." Tony smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Funny running into you here, Manning." He gestured around the tiny cell. "Looks like we're cellmates." Trevor's face went white. "Tony, I don't have your money." "I know," Tony said, sitting down on the opposite bunk, "but we've got 5 years to work that out. And in here, interest compounds daily." He leaned back against the wall, hands behind his head. "You and me, Trev, we're going to get real close." Trevor curled tighter into the corner. Officer Davis appeared in the doorway. He looked at Trevor, then at Tony. Then he pulled the cell door shut. The lock clicked. Trevor Manning thought he could steal from a helpless old man. He thought family loyalty would protect him. He was wrong. Justice found him not just from the law, but from the very people he'd betrayed. Thomas Bradford got his house back, his daughter back, his life back. And Trevor, he learned that karma never forgets. It just waits for the perfect moment to strike. Never underestimate the quiet ones. And never ever bet against a father's love or a father's justice. Back at 428 Oak Park Avenue, Thomas stood by the window. Rebecca came up beside him. She rested her head on his shoulder. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft, quiet, clean, and for the first time in years, everything was exactly as it should be. Looking back at my story, I never imagined my own family would betray me like this. But God gave me strength when I had nothing left. Don't be like I was silent, trusting blindly, hoping things would fix themselves. Speak up, seek help. God doesn't abandon the vulnerable. He sends people like Charles when we need them most. The lesson from these grandpa stories, family isn't always blood. These family stories teach us that God places strangers in your path who become your truest defenders. Grandpa's stories like mine aren't just entertainment, they're warnings. Financial abuse in family stories is real. Emotional manipulation in Grandpa's stories is real. And karma. That's very real, too. If you enjoyed this, subscribe and share your own grandpa stories or family stories below. Final note, this content contains dramatized storytelling elements for educational purposes. Some details are fictionalized, but the core lessons about recognizing financial and emotional abuse are very real. If this style isn't for you, that's okay. Please seek content better suited to your needs.